As the dust of the intergalactic war hung between the stars, I opened my eyes in another dark cell. I couldn't remember how many days had passed since my captivity, maybe a week, maybe a month. Time had lost its meaning here. There was only the coldness of the walls, the weariness that permeated my body, and the brutality of the war etched in my mind. My name is Ryan Miller, a human soldier. In the midst of an intergalactic war, I was captured by the Zorak Empire. My captivity began aboard Zorak's flagship, a gigantic spaceship, and continued with my exile to this hellish planet. Zorak's ruthless armies enslaved the planet's native population and ruthlessly plundered its resources. This planet was under Zorak's control, and there seemed to be no way out. The cell door opened with a metallic hiss. The light streaming in blinded my eyes. For a few seconds, my eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I could barely make out the source of the light. 3 huge soldiers were coming towards me. They grabbed me and dragged me to my feet. For a moment, the pain in my knees was more real than anything else. "Get up, human," one of them said, his voice harsh and unemotional. As they took me to another larger cell, I was confronted by a group of humans and natives of the planet. They looked at me with tired but determined eyes. I didn't know who they were, but it was clear that they were part of this resistance movement. My eyes swept over everyone in the group until they landed on one person, Kyra. I knew she was Zorak's daughter. Unlike her father, this warrior had a very different bearing. Her gaze was fierce, but also thoughtful and calculating. The distinctive scars on her face showed that she had been in the midst of war for years. When Kyra's gaze met mine, I saw contempt in her eyes, but there was something more underneath. A question, a curiosity. "Were you also banished to this miserable planet, human?" she asked, her voice threatening and sharp. I was silent for a while, not knowing what to say. "Whatever you plan to do with me here, I can be useful," I finally said. I tried to keep the determination in my voice, but the uncertainty was real. Kyra did something that looked like a smile, but underneath it was a hint of contempt. "Humans don't know how to win a war. Their history is filled with cowardice and defeat. My father was right. Weaklings like you should not be involved in intergalactic warfare." His words made me angry, but they also made me wary of him. Kyra had made a name for herself in the war as one of her father's most capable generals, but I was surprised to see her here, in this resistance. "Strength comes from intelligence, Kyra," I replied, not taking my eyes off hers. "You and your father think that brute force will solve everything. But wars are won by those who know strategy." Kyra's brow furrowed slightly. My words must have reminded her of something else than she thought. She looked at me more closely, and this time the contempt on her face slowly gave way to something else. Maybe curiosity, maybe a hint of respect. "I'll give you a chance, human," he said coolly. "If you are as good as you say you are, show us." The task Kyra had given me after meeting with the resistance group required me to devise a plan to help the oppressed people of Zorak. As I looked around, they all looked at me with hope, but also with suspicion. Kyra kept her eyes on me like a predator, ready to corner me. "Okay," I said, a plan forming inside me. "I will show you a way, but you all have to trust me." As we began to work together, the tension between Kyra and I was inevitable. Her warrior spirit and my strategic acumen kept us at arm's length. But over time, Kyra's skills on the battlefield impressed me, and her view of me began to change. As we strengthened the resistance, our respect for each other grew. In time, our relationship was not limited to the battlefield. On quiet nights, sitting side by side in the dark, I began to see the real person under Kyra's armor, a woman who had grown up in her father's shadow, but was trying to find her own way. The time I spent with her made me feel that I had not only gained an ally, but that an indescribable bond had formed between us. Kyra realized that the person she had despised when she first saw me could offer her a future. At the height of the war, we fought side by side against Zorak's armies. We planned together. We fought together. Kyra had come to trust me, and I did everything I could to repay that trust. In her eyes, I was no longer just a soldier, but a leader, a friend, and perhaps something more. When we succeeded in overthrowing Emperor Zorak, the people of the planet gained their freedom. But that freedom was the beginning of a new order. Kyra was forced to take her father's throne. The people, who had suffered under Zorak's cruel rule, now sought new hope under Kyra's leadership. Kyra had to shoulder this burden, and I stood by her side, helping to build this new order. But on the night the war ended, Kyra told me a secret. The time we had spent together, the moments we had spent fighting and getting to know each other, had changed her, not only as a leader, but as a woman. Kyra was pregnant. It was not only the result of the love between a human and an alien, but also the beginning of the new birth of a galactic empire. As Ryan Miller, I not only won a war on this planet, I found a place where my heart and soul belong. Together with Kyra, we laid the foundation for a new galactic order and began to build the legacy of the future empire. In Kyra's eyes, I was no longer just a leader, but a lover, a friend, and a galactic hero. The first weeks after Zorak's fall were a time of great chaos and rebuilding. After the cruel reign of the old emperor, Kyra had taken on the responsibility of establishing a new order. The people of the planet looked to Kyra, who had become a symbol of resistance, rekindling long-stifled hopes. I was at her side and among the people, playing an important role in the rebuilding process, but at the same time my personal relationship with Kyra deepened. Sometimes at night, sitting on the terrace of the palace, we would gaze out into the endless darkness of the galaxy and contemplate what the future held. Watching the rebirth of the planet under her leadership filled me with pride, but also with a growing uneasiness. Over time, as Kyra's pregnancy progressed, the enormity of our responsibility became more apparent. Not only were we ruling a galaxy, but we were raising a future emperor. Kyra was strong and determined as a leader, but when I was with her, I saw a different side of her. She, like me, sometimes wanted to feel like a simple human being in the chaos of her life. Our bond was not just physical or strategic. We shared each other's deepest fears and hopes. One evening, as the sun set and the golden lights shone over the palace, Kyra turned to me, her eyes full of both wisdom and unease. "Ryan," he said, his voice soft, free of his usual harshness. "I have much to do as leader of this new order, but this life growing inside me, I don't know how to handle it." I placed my hand gently on her shoulder and looked deep into her eyes. "Kyra, you are a strong leader, but remember, you don't have to carry this burden alone. We will raise this child together, and I will be by your side." The faint smile that appeared in his eyes eased some of my worries. "Sharing this responsibility with you gives me strength, Ryan," he said. "But there are still many uncertainties about our future, both in the Empire and in us." I understood Kyra's concerns. Remnants of the old order still lurked around every corner. Her father Zorak's loyal generals would occasionally start rebellions, quiet resistance to the new order. These uprisings had the potential to weaken the empire under Kyra's leadership, undermine public confidence, and erode Kyra's authority. In the face of these dangers, we knew we had to do everything in our power. Using the strategic acumen we had gained in times of resistance, we built a strong line of defense against the remnants of the old order. Kyra and I spent long hours planning and meeting with generals to strengthen the empire against threats from within and without. But one thing was certain: no matter what, we would fight together to build the future. One morning, at the height of the unrest, Kyra called me to her side. She had a determined look on her face, but I noticed a slight hesitation in her eyes. "Ryan," she said as she spread out a map on the table, "the former General Garen, known for his loyalty to my father, has amassed a large army on the western border. If we do not stop him, the foundations of our new order will crumble before they even begin." Garen's name had been feared throughout the empire for years. One of his father's most loyal men, Garen was notorious for his ruthlessness and strategic acumen. It was impossible to turn his loyalty to Kyra, so we had no choice but to fight him. "What are you going to do?" I asked, keeping my eyes on her face. "We will defeat him in his own way," Kyra said, pointing at the map. "Garen thinks we are weak and can collapse before we are even born. We will show him that we are much stronger than he thinks." The plan was simple but effective. We would move quickly on Garen's army, take him by surprise, and strike a powerful blow. But would take great courage and strategic moves to carry out the plan. Together with Kyra, we organized our troops and marched against Garen's army. Every moment on the battlefield made me admire Kyra's leadership once again. She was not only a strong warrior, but also a leader who could outsmart her enemy with her strategic intelligence. And in this battle, being at her side was not only my duty, but also an expression of my loyalty to her. In the midst of the battle, Kyra's voice echoed. "Forward! Never retreat!" she shouted. She constantly encouraged her warriors to increase their courage and determination. I fought side by side with her, trying to break through the enemy lines. At the most critical moment of the battle, Kyra saw an opportunity. There was a gap in Garen's defenses, and she took advantage of it. Together we advanced on Garen's base camp and cornered him. When Garen stood before Kyra, his eyes were filled with fear and anger. Her father's old general was now powerless against a young and determined leader. "Garen," Kyra said, pointing her sword at him, "this realm is now under my rule. I will defeat you and disloyal men like you." Garen raised his sword in a last stand, but Kyra cut him down with a quick thrust. The battle was over. Garen's defeat had proven to all the power of the new order. Standing on the battlefield, with only silence around us, I looked at Kyra. She was no longer a leader, but an empress. And by her side, I was a man laying the foundations of this new order. After Garen's defeat, a new era began in the Empire. Under Kyra's leadership, the remnants of Zorak's oppressive regime were purged, and the people grew more hopeful. With Kyra's determination and vision, we made great strides in rebuilding the Empire. But every victory came at a cost, and the wounds of war had not yet fully healed. The Empire's central city, the Great Crystal Palace, once a symbol of Zorak's tyrannical rule, was now a place that represented Kyra's reign. With her, people from all over the Empire came to the palace gates with hope. People from all walks of life gathered here to participate in the rebuilding process, to find a place in the new order. But Kyra's challenges, both as a leader and as an expectant mother, grew. The first night we returned from the battlefield after Garen's defeat, Kyra and I sat on the balcony of the palace. The night sky was filled with millions of stars, and in that infinite expanse, I once again felt how vast the galaxy was. Kyra put her hands on her stomach and took a deep breath. She stared at the sky and thought about the future. "Ryan," she said, her voice softer than before, "as much as I'd like to think this war is over, I know there are greater dangers waiting for us in the galaxy. We had crushed the rebellion within the Empire, but throughout the galaxy there were still forces influenced by the old order. And those forces were waiting for an opportunity to undermine Kyra's authority. We had to fight them not only with military force, but also with diplomacy. We recognize these dangers," I said, looking at him. "But you must remember that you are not alone. To rebuild the Empire, military victories alone are not enough. You have the trust of the people, and it is your vision that will hold them together." Kyra took another deep breath and turned her head toward me. There was determination in her eyes, but also a hint of unease. "The dark shadow left by my father still hovers over us, Ryan. We're trying to find ways to erase it, but some things just can't be erased, no matter how hard we try." I took his hand and tried to calm him down. "The vestiges of the past may be strong, but the future is in our hands. If we consider every step we take, the Empire can achieve true peace." Kyra seemed to be encouraged by my words. I knew she would once again take strong and decisive action to solve the Empire's problems, but this was a battle not only with external enemies, but also with the darkness within ourselves. Kyra's inner pressures, combined with the responsibilities of motherhood, became more and more overwhelming. Over the following months, as Kyra's pregnancy progressed, things slowly began to fall into place in the palace and the Empire. The imperial cities began to flourish again, thanks to Kyra's reforms, and everything that had been destroyed by the old order was slowly being restored. But the biggest problem Kyra faced was the remnants of the old order. While some of the rebel generals had surrendered, others were still plotting in dark corners. One morning, as we met with the generals in the palace assembly hall, Kyra explained our next move. We had received word that there was still movement on the eastern borders of the empire, and that this could be the start of a larger rebellion. "We must crush this rebellion," Kyra said, looking at the generals, her hands on the table. "We cannot fully lay the foundations for the new order until we destroy the influence of the old regime." The generals nodded in agreement, but one of them, General Kalin, interjected in a skeptical tone. "The rebel generals can hurt us not only with military force, but also by undermining public confidence. We can defeat them on the battlefield, but how do we undo their victory in the minds of the people?" Kyra was silent for a moment after these words, then spoke firmly. "We will win this rebellion not only with weapons, but with the love and trust of the people. We must show them that this new order is truly for their good." At the end of the meeting, Kyra asked to speak with me privately. When we were alone in the conference room, I noticed the deep thought in her eyes. "Ryan, we may not have much time left to win the trust of the people. Even after the battles are over, we must reach into their hearts and minds to make the victories last." "You can do this, Kyra," I said in a reassuring voice. "Under your leadership, the people will be reborn. But we must also be careful. The rebels will try to exploit our weaknesses. As we gain the trust of the people, we must not lose sight of our enemies." Kyra nodded. "You are right. This war will not only be won with swords, but with minds as well." One morning, Kyra's pregnancy had progressed to the point where she could no longer go to the battlefields. But that didn't stop her. She continued to manage the affairs of the palace, strategizing the new order. Rumors circulated among the people that Kyra was weakening, but these rumors were based on the lies of the rebel generals. Meanwhile, I remained by Kyra's side, supporting her at all times. In her absence, it was my duty to lead the Imperial Army, suppress the rebellions, and protect the borders of the Empire. But at the same time, the time I spent with Kyra reminded me that this war was not only a struggle against external enemies, but also a struggle within ourselves. One day, Kyra turned to me and took a deep breath. "Ryan, the birth of this child is coming. It will be a great day for the Empire, but what if I can't handle the responsibility?" I took her hand and looked at her encouragingly. "Kyra, you have already shouldered all these responsibilities. The birth of this child is part of our future, not just the Empire's. We will do it together." At that moment, the worry in Kyra's eyes gave way to a slight smile. "Maybe you're right, Ryan. We will lead this empire together, and this child will be the symbol of our future." As the days passed, the rebirth of the empire gathered pace. Kyra's popularity with the people grew, and one by one the remnants of the old regime were destroyed. But our greatest test would come with the birth of Kyra's child. In the final days of Kyra's pregnancy, things began to fall apart in the empire. The last vestiges of Zorak's oppressive regime were being removed, and the people looked to the future with hope. But the excitement and anxiety of the impending birth was palpable throughout the palace. One morning, the silence of the palace was broken by Kyra's pain. The doctors and nurses in the palace sprang into action. I wanted to stay at Kyra's side, but the doctor said that only medical staff should be with her during labor. With a flutter in my heart and a wave of fear and joy within me, I waited. As the hours passed, the atmosphere in the corridors of the palace was tense. Everyone knew that this birth was more than just the birth of a baby. This child symbolized the future of the empire. Kyra's child was not only her heir, but also a gateway to peace. After a while, one of the doctors approached me, smiled, and said, "Congratulations, Ryan, you have a son." Suddenly, all the fear inside me was replaced by a deep sense of relief. I was the happiest person in the world at that moment. I rushed to Kyra's side. She was lying on the bed, tired but peaceful, with a tiny baby in her arms. Her face was filled with an indescribable happiness. Our son Ryan, Kyra said, her voice trembling but happy. This is our new beginning. I looked at the baby. He hadn't even opened his eyes yet, but his mere presence gave me an indescribable sense of hope. At that moment, I felt that not only the future of the Empire, but also my own future would be shaped in the hands of this little boy. I approached Kyra and took our son's tiny hand in mine. What will his name be? I asked. His name will be Kalen, Kyra said, looking at me with her eyes. I want him to be a strong and wise leader. Kalen, I said, repeating the name. The hope of our future. Kalen's birth was cause for great celebration among the people of the Empire. They realized that a new era had begun under Kyra's leadership. The rebellions had all but ended, the borders were secure, and the people of the Empire were enjoying the peace and prosperity of the new order. But the greatest accomplishment was the balance Kyra and I found together. Kyra became a strong and decisive leader. The Empire was strengthened not only by military victories, but also by winning the hearts and minds of the people. I stood by Kyra's side, supporting her, but also ready to do whatever it took to protect and grow our family. The years passed, and Kalen grew up. The Empire grew stronger with her birth. Kyra and I did our best to raise her to be a wise and just leader. Kalen became a brave child like her father, and a wise child like her mother. The future of the Empire looked even brighter in his hands. One day, as Kyra and I sat in the palace garden, our eyes caught Kalen running around. His energy and joy made us forget the days of war. Kyra turned to me and smiled and said, "Ryan, this realm is what is because of you." I shook my head. "No, Kyra. This empire was reborn under your leadership, and I'm just lucky to have you by my side." The smile on Kyra's face widened. "Maybe we did it together," she said, taking my hand. It was then that I realized how much my life had changed. Once I was just a rebel, but now I had a family, an empire, and a greater purpose in life. This life with Kyra had conquered all odds. And in that moment, I realized that true victory is not only won on the battlefield. True victory is won through love, hope, and faith. My journey with Kyra was more than a battle. It was a victory in the inner world of a resistor. As our empire grew in peace and prosperity, I knew that together, Kyra, Kalen, and I could overcome anything. No matter where in the galaxy, our story would forever shine as a beacon of hope.